16 months after the divorce, the emergency room called the most feared man in New Orleans and said, "Sir, you're listed as the father." That was the moment Claire Bennett's secret stopped belonging to her. Outside, rain hammered the Asheville streets. Inside, she stood beneath the hospital's white lights with an empty baby blanket pressed to her chest while doctors fought to save her 8-month-old son. She had spent nearly a year building a quiet life, far from Dominic Vale, far from armed guards, locked doors, and a love that had once felt dangerously close to a prison. But one medical question forced her to speak his name, and when Dominic learned he had a son, he did not ask for permission to come. Stay until the end, because this story is about what happens when protection becomes control, when love becomes leverage, and when one hidden child can bring an empire to its knees. Like this video and comment where you're watching from, the name Claire spoke beneath those hospital lights had once been the center of her entire life. 16 months earlier, Dominic Vale had been her husband. In New Orleans, his name opened courthouse doors, closed police files, and made men lower their voices when he entered a room. Newspapers called him the disciplined owner of Vale Maritime, a shipping empire built from river terminals, freight companies, warehouses, and old family money. Politicians shook his hand at charity dinners. Business leaders praised his vision. Priests accepted his donations without asking where every dollar had come from. Claire had learned that respect and fear often wore the same suit. Their house stood in the Garden District behind a black iron gate and a row of ancient live oaks. From the street it looked graceful and untouched by time. White columns framed the entrance. Ivy climbed the brick walls. In spring, jasmine softened the air around the courtyard. Inside, nearly every door had a lock. There were cameras above the gates beneath the balconies and along the back garden. Men in dark coats changed shifts before dawn. Cars arrived through the rear entrance after midnight carrying people Claire never saw at breakfast. Dominic called it security. At first she had believed him. The beginning of their marriage had been full of details so tender they almost concealed everything else. Dominic remembered how she took her coffee strong with a little cream and no sugar. He knew she could not sleep if a closet door was left open. When she worked late, he left a lamp burning beside the bed and placed a glass of water on her nightstand. He rarely said that he missed her. Instead, he appeared outside her office at 7 in the evening leaning against a black car while the city moved around him. "You said you had another hour," she would say. "You said that 2 hours ago. I have a deadline. You also have dinner getting cold." There was never irritation in his voice, only certainty. Claire would roll her eyes, gather her files, and let him take the heavy bag from her shoulder. In restaurants, Dominic always chose the chair facing the door. At public events, one hand rested at the small of her back, warm and steady. He watched crowded rooms without seeming to watch them. Whenever Claire caught him doing it, he would look down at her. "What? You are counting exits again. I am admiring the architecture. You have never admired architecture in your life." His mouth would curve. "I admired this house. You bought it because it has reinforced walls. I can appreciate 2 things at once." She had laughed then. There were nights when Dominic seemed capable of becoming the man she wanted him to be. On quiet Sundays, they ate breakfast in the kitchen while rain moved across the windows. He read financial reports. Claire read legal briefs. Their feet touched beneath the table. Sometimes he closed his folder and watched her. What she asked. "You bite your lip when you disagree with a judge." "I disagree with most judges." "I know. You are staring. I am married. I am allowed." She would try to hide her smile behind her coffee. Those moments made the rest easier to excuse. The phone calls that ended when she entered a room. The meetings held behind closed doors. The men who looked at Dominic for approval before speaking in Claire's presence. The nights he left their bed without waking her and returned before sunrise smelling of rain tobacco and the river. She told herself every powerful business had secrets. She told herself privacy was not dishonesty. Then, one night, she woke to the sound of water running downstairs. The clock beside the bed read 3:17. Dominic's side of the mattress was cold. Claire pulled on a robe and followed the light into the kitchen. Dominic stood at the sink with his sleeves rolled above his elbows. Blood moved through the water in pale red ribbons. One of his knuckles was split. There was a dark stain near the cuff of his white shirt. Claire stopped in the doorway. Dominic. He looked at her through the reflection in the window. His face was calm, too calm. Go back to bed. Her eyes dropped to his hands. Whose blood is that? Not mine. That was not my question. He turned off the water. For a moment only, the old refrigerator hummed between them. Dominic reached for a towel. You do not need the answer. Claire stared at him. You keep saying that like ignorance is a gift. In my world, it is. I live in your world. His jaw tightened slightly. No, Claire, you live beside it. The words struck harder than if he had shouted. She stepped into the kitchen. You leave this house in the middle of the night. You come back covered in someone else's blood. Then you tell me to return to bed as if I am a guest who walked into the wrong room. Dominic folded the towel around his injured hand. You are my wife. Then treat me like one. I am protecting you. From what his eyes moved toward the dark window, from knowing things that cannot be unknown. Claire followed his gaze. Two men stood beyond the courtyard beneath the trees. One smoked. The other watched the street. She looked back at Dominic. What happened tonight? He said nothing. That silence entered their marriage and never truly left. The next morning, a velvet box waited beside Claire's coffee. Inside was an antique diamond necklace. Dominic sat across from her reading messages on his phone. Claire closed the box. What is this a gift? For what? His thumb stopped moving across the screen. Does there have to be a reason? Yes. Dominic looked at her. She pushed the box toward him. I asked for the truth. I cannot give you that. So you bought jewelry instead. His face hardened not with anger, but with the frustration of a man who had solved thousands of problems and could not understand why money failed to solve this one. Claire left the necklace on the table. After that, the house changed. Or perhaps Claire finally saw what had always been there. The security codes no longer felt reassuring. They felt like permission Dominic could withdraw. The men at the gate no longer seemed like employees. They seemed like reminders. Even the tall windows became another kind of wall, beautiful enough to make imprisonment look like luxury. Claire tried to reach him. She tried during dinner when his phone was face down beside his plate. She tried in the back seat of his car as they crossed the city beneath yellow streetlights. She tried in bed lying beside him while music drifted faintly from a bar somewhere beyond the walls. What are you afraid will happen if you tell me the truth? She asked one night. Dominic stared at the ceiling. That you will be placed in danger. I am already in danger. I simply do not know its name. That is not the same thing. It is worse. He turned his head toward her. You think knowledge gives you control, and you think control gives me safety. It does. No, it gives you comfort. His expression closed. Claire could see the exact moment he retreated behind the calm face he used with everyone else. It is late, he said. She rolled away from him. It always becomes late when I ask the wrong question. The distance between them grew quietly. There was no single night when love ended. It faded in pieces. A dinner eaten alone. A locked study. A touch that felt tender until Claire remembered how little she knew about the hand touching her. Still, there were moments when she almost forgave everything. Dominic came home during a thunderstorm after being gone for 2 days. He found Claire asleep on the sofa with court documents spread across the floor. He lifted her gently. She woke with her cheek against his chest. "You are home," she murmured. "I am. Where were you?" His arms tightened around her. "Working." The old answer. She should have pushed away. Instead, she buried her face against his neck and breathed him in. Dominic carried her upstairs as if she weighed nothing. He undressed her slowly with care that felt almost reverent. He touched her as if he could speak through his hands what he refused to say aloud. Afterward, Claire lay against him, listening to his heart. "I love you," she whispered. Dominic's hand moved through her hair. "I know." She waited. He had said the words before, rarely, but enough that she knew he could. That night he remained silent. Claire closed her eyes. She understood then that love could be present and still fail to save a marriage. The final fracture began with a shipping agreement. Claire was reviewing documents at her firm when she noticed her electronic credentials attached to a legal opinion she had never written. The client was a holding company registered in Delaware. The company owned a warehouse near the river. The warehouse leased space to another company with no employees and no visible operations. Claire followed the chain for 2 hours. At the bottom of it sat Vale Maritime. She drove home before sunset. Dominic was in his study with Caleb Rourke, his head of security. Caleb stopped speaking when Claire entered. "Leave us," she said. Caleb looked at Dominic. That small glance enraged her more than anything else. "I said leave." Dominic nodded once. Caleb walked out and closed the door. Claire placed the documents on the desk. "You used my credentials." Dominic looked down at the pages. It was handled. "My name is attached to a legal opinion for a shell company. There is no exposure. That is not the point." "It is exactly the point." Claire stared at him. Dominic rose from his chair. "The company will be dissolved within the month. The contract will never be examined. Your firm will never know. You signed my name without asking me. I needed the opinion issued quickly. You could have asked. You would have refused. Yes. Then asking would have changed nothing." The simplicity of his answer left her cold. "You decided for me. I removed the risk. You removed my choice." Dominic moved around the desk. "Claire, listen to me." "No. You listen." Her voice shook, but she did not lower it. "You do not get to involve me in something illegal and call it protection because you believe no one will catch us." His eyes sharpened. "It is not illegal. Then why did you hide it?" He stopped. The room fell silent. Claire looked at the man she loved and saw the truth with painful clarity. Dominic did not understand why she felt betrayed. He believed the result mattered more than consent. He believed that if he prevented consequences, he had done nothing wrong. "You really think you protected me?" she said. "I did." Claire nodded slowly. "That is why I have to leave." For the first time, Dominic lost control of his expression. "No." It was not loud. It carried the weight of every order he had ever given. Claire's heart pounded. "You cannot say no to this. You are angry. I am finished. We will discuss it tomorrow. There is nothing to discuss." Dominic stepped closer. Claire stood her ground even as every instinct told her to move back. "You are my wife, and I am not your property." Pain flashed through his eyes. Then it vanished behind anger. "I have never treated you like property. You monitor my car. Your men report where I go. Every entrance to this house answers to you. You decide what I am allowed to know, what risks I am allowed to take, and now which laws my name can be used to break. I kept you alive." Claire swallowed against the pressure in her throat. "I disappeared inside this marriage." Dominic went still. The words harmed him. She saw it. Part of her wanted to take them back. The larger part knew they were true. Their attorneys handled the rest. Dominic did not contest the divorce. He transferred money Claire refused to touch, signed the property settlement, and agreed in writing not to place her under surveillance. 2 years of marriage became signatures on cream-colored paper. On the final afternoon, rain covered the windows of the law office. Dominic sat across from Claire at a long conference table. He wore a dark suit and no wedding ring. Claire had removed hers that morning. She kept touching the pale line on her finger. When the final document was signed, the attorneys began collecting files. Dominic stood. "I will walk you out." Claire almost refused. Instead, she followed him into the hallway. They waited alone before the elevator. Dominic looked as controlled as ever, but exhaustion shadowed his face. For one dangerous second, Claire hoped he would ask her to stay. She hated herself for hoping. The elevator doors opened. Dominic said, "You will be safer away from me." Claire looked at him. "That may be the most honest thing you ever gave me." She entered the elevator. Dominic remained in the hallway. The doors closed on the man she still loved. Claire moved to Asheville with 2 suitcases, a box of legal books, and enough pride to pretend she was not broken. The city did not know Dominic Vale. That was its greatest beauty. There were mountains beyond the streets, blue and soft beneath the morning mist. Coffee shops opened before sunrise. Musicians played outside small restaurants. Her apartment sat above a used bookstore in a brick building with uneven floors and pipes that groaned whenever someone turned on the shower. Nothing worked perfectly. Everything belonged to her. Claire found a position at a local corporate law firm. The salary was modest, but every dollar entered an account Dominic could not see. She bought groceries without a driver waiting outside. She locked her own door at night. For the first time in years, silence felt peaceful. 4 weeks after the divorce, she became sick during a client meeting. She blamed the coffee, then stress, then the sandwich someone had brought into the conference room. By Friday evening, Claire sat on the bathroom floor holding a pregnancy test. 2 pink lines appeared beneath the light. Rain tapped softly against the window. Claire stared until the lines blurred. Her first thought was Dominic. She imagined him holding a baby with dark hair and serious eyes. She imagined his expression changing when tiny fingers closed around one of his. For one breath, hope filled the room. Then memory followed. Children make men predictable. Love gives your enemies a map. Claire placed one hand over her stomach. Her phone lay beside the sink. Dominic's number was still saved. She picked it up. Her thumb hovered above his name. If she called, he would come. He would move her into a guarded house. He would hire doctors, drivers, and men with weapons. He would make every decision before she had time to understand the question. The child would be protected. The child would also belong to Dominic's world before taking a first breath. Claire lowered the phone. "I am choosing you," she whispered. "Even if you hate me for it one day." She deleted his number. Pregnancy narrowed her life into appointments, bills, and careful calculations. She worked until her ankles swelled beneath her desk. She bought maternity clothes from thrift stores. Mara helped her carry a second-hand crib up 3 flights of stairs. At midnight, Claire sat on the nursery floor surrounded by screws and pieces of wood. Mara held up the instructions. These were written by someone who hates mothers. Claire laughed until the laugh broke into tears. Mara lowered the paper. "You can still tell him." Claire wiped her face. "No. He has a right to know. And my child has a right to be safe. You do not know what Dominic would do. That is the problem. Henry was born during a spring thunderstorm. The labor lasted 18 hours. When the nurse placed him against Claire's chest, He opened his dark eyes and stared at her with an expression far too serious for a newborn. Claire laughed and cried at once. "Hello, Henry." His fingers curled against her skin. Mara stood beside the bed crying openly. "He looks like him," she whispered. Claire already knew. Henry had Dominic's hair, his mouth, and the small crease between his brows. Every feature felt like a secret made visible. The months that followed were measured in feedings, laundry, and sleep, stolen in brief pieces. Claire learned how expensive safety could be. Daycare consumed most of her paycheck. Formula vanished faster than she expected. Medical bills arrived in white envelopes she left unopened until she had the courage to count them. Her supervisor smiled sympathetically the first time Henry became sick. The second time he spoke about dependability. By the third, he used the phrase long-term fit. Claire returned home each night carrying Henry her laptop, a diaper bag, and an exhaustion that seemed to live beneath her bones. Still, there were moments of pure happiness. Henry falling asleep against her heart. His first laugh in the bathtub. The way he reached for her every morning as if she were the entire world. "You are safe," Claire whispered whenever fear entered the room. She said it until she almost believed it. The night Henry became ill began like any other difficult evening. Rain pressed against the windows. Claire arrived late from work. Henry felt warm when she lifted him from the car seat. She gave him medicine. She changed him into soft blue pajamas. She walked through the apartment humming the song her mother used to sing when Claire was a child. Henry cried for nearly an hour. Then he stopped. The silence was immediate and wrong. Claire looked down. His eyes were half closed. His breathing had become shallow. The thermometer displayed a number above 104. "No," Claire whispered. She called the pediatrician and reached an answering service. She called Mara while stuffing diapers and insurance cards into a bag. Mara heard Claire's voice and said, "Take him to the emergency room." Claire carried Henry into the rain. She drove through Asheville with one hand gripping the wheel and the other reaching toward the back seat. At every red light, she turned to make sure his chest was still moving. By the time the hospital lights appeared ahead, Henry was no longer crying. Claire abandoned the car near the entrance and ran through the automatic doors with her silent son against her chest. Minutes later, a doctor asked for the medical history of Henry's father. Claire looked through the glass at the child she had hidden to keep safe. Then she spoke the name that brought the past rushing back toward her. Dominic Vale. The name left Claire's mouth so quietly that Dr. Evelyn Hart leaned closer to make sure she had heard it correctly. Claire nodded. For 1 second, the doctor's professional expression shifted. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Everyone along the Gulf Coast knew the name. Even people who had never seen Dominic understood that he owned more than ships and warehouses. His companies moved freight through ports from Louisiana to Texas. His donations built hospital wings and funded political campaigns. His face appeared in financial magazines beside words like discipline, expansion, and legacy. The stories that never reached print were darker. Dr. Hart returned her attention to the tablet in her hands. "Do you have his current number?" Claire looked through the glass doors toward the treatment room. Henry lay beneath white lights while a nurse held an oxygen mask near his face. Another nurse pressed adhesive leads against his small chest. "I deleted it. Can you reach him another way?" "No." Dr. Hart studied her for a moment. "Is he dangerous?" The question should have had a simple answer. Claire thought about Dominic washing blood from his hands. She thought about the way men obeyed him without being asked twice. She thought about his warmth in bed, the books he bought her, the quiet hand at the small of her back. "Yes," she whispered. Then Henry's monitor began to sound. Claire rose so quickly that the chair struck the wall. Dr. Hart caught her arm. "They are adjusting his medication. Let them work." Claire could not look away. "He has a heart condition in his family," she said. Dominic was diagnosed when he was young, something electrical, an irregular rhythm. Dr. Hart's attention sharpened. "What was the name? I do not remember. Did he take medication for years? He stopped before we met. Any surgeries? No. I think his father had the same condition." The doctor began entering information. "That matters. We can use it." Claire pressed a hand to her mouth. All those months of telling herself Henry was safer without Dominic, and one piece of Dominic's history had already helped the doctors understand what was happening inside their son. Dr. Hart touched Claire's shoulder. "We will find him." The hospital administrator found Dominic's private contact through a combination of insurance records, corporate filings, and the emergency number attached to Vale Maritime. The call went out at 12:14 in the morning. Claire did not hear the conversation. She only saw the change it caused. A hospital administrator appeared in the hallway with a phone pressed to her ear. 2 security guards moved closer to the pediatric unit. Dr. Hart stepped into an office and closed the door. Mara arrived 20 minutes later wearing sweatpants beneath a long wool coat. Her hair was wet from the rain and she still had one slipper on her left foot. She crossed the waiting room and wrapped both arms around Claire. Claire did not cry until then. The sound came out of her without warning, thin and broken. Mara held her tighter. "What happened?" He stopped crying. "Is he stable? They are treating him. Did they say what it is? They think it could be meningitis." Mara closed her eyes. Claire pulled away and wiped her face with both hands. They needed his father's medical history. Mara went still. "You told them?" Claire nodded. Mara looked toward the hallway. "Does he know? The hospital called him?" The silence between them filled with rain and the distant movement of carts across polished floors. Mara lowered her voice. "Is Dominic coming?" Claire looked through the dark windows. Yes. She had no proof. She did not need any. Dominic always came when something belonged to him. At 12:58, Dr. Hart returned. "Henry's heart rhythm has responded to medication. His fever is still high, and we are continuing antibiotics while we wait for the cultures." Claire stood. "Can I see him for a few minutes?" The doctor led her into the room. Henry looked smaller than he had an hour earlier. Someone had changed him into a hospital gown covered with tiny green turtles. An intravenous line ran into his left hand. A monitor beside the crib turned every heartbeat into light and sound. Claire approached slowly. She touched one finger to his palm. Henry's hand closed weakly around it. Her knees nearly gave way. "I am here," she whispered. "Mommy is right here." For 8 months those words had been enough. She had been the one who fed him, bathed him, carried him through fevers, and woke before every cry was fully formed. Now machines surrounded him, and Claire understood how little love could control. She bent over the crib and pressed her lips to his forehead. "I'm sorry." She did not know whether she was apologizing for the illness, for hiding him, or for the man already traveling toward them. Dr. Hart waited near the door. Mr. Vale confirmed the family condition. It is called Brugada syndrome. We are taking additional precautions with Henry's fever because high temperatures can increase the risk of a dangerous rhythm. Claire looked up. "Is that what happened?" "It may have contributed. We are still evaluating him. Will he be all right?" The doctor did not give her the comfort of a lie. "He is responding. That is what I can tell you now." Claire nodded and looked back at Henry. Dominic's history had reached their son before Dominic had. Near 2 in the morning, the hospital changed. The transformation was subtle at first. A man in a dark suit appeared near the main entrance and spoke quietly with security. Another entered through the parking garage. A black vehicle stopped beneath the emergency awning, then moved away without releasing a passenger. Mara noticed before Claire did. "He is close." Claire looked at her. "How do you know?" because everyone suddenly looks like they are waiting for an inspection. A low sound moved over the roof. Not a helicopter. The nearest private airfield was less than 30 minutes away, and Dominic preferred moving without spectacle when he could. The elevator doors opened at 2:23. Caleb Rourke stepped out first. He wore a charcoal coat and carried no visible weapon, but his eyes moved across the hallway with the cold efficiency Claire remembered. 2 security men followed him. Then Dominic appeared. For 16 months, Claire had trained herself not to remember exactly how he occupied a room. Memory failed her. Dominic did not need to announce himself. People felt him before they understood why. He wore a black suit beneath a long coat. Rain darkened his hair at the temples. His face looked sharper than it had on the day of the divorce, as if the months apart had stripped away anything unnecessary. His gaze found Claire immediately. He stopped. She had imagined this moment many times. In some versions, he shouted. In others, he looked through her as if she had never mattered. The real Dominic did neither. He stared at her with an expression so controlled that the emotion beneath it became more frightening. His eyes moved over her wet clothing, the hospital bracelet around her wrist, the exhaustion beneath her eyes. Then he looked toward Henry's room. "Where is he?" Claire stood. Mara rose beside her. Dominic approached. Caleb remained several steps behind, but Claire could feel his suspicion like pressure against her skin. "The doctors are treating him," Claire said. Dominic stopped close enough that she could smell rain and cedar on his coat. "I asked where, and I answered." His jaw tightened. "Where is my son?" The words struck the air between them. Not a child. Not the baby. My son. Claire felt Mara shift beside her. Before either of them could speak again, Dr. Hart entered the hallway. Mr. Vale Dominic turned. The fury in his expression vanished behind polished control. "I am Dr. Evelyn Hart. I am treating Henry. How is he?" "His fever remains high, but his heart rhythm has stabilized. We have begun antibiotics for suspected meningitis. The lumbar puncture results are pending. I brought a cardiologist." Dr. Hart glanced at the man standing near the elevator with a leather case. "He may provide records and consult with our team. Henry remains my patient." Dominic held her gaze. Most people looked away first. Dr. Hart did not. "Understood," he said. Claire almost smiled. Dominic noticed. He always noticed. Dr. Hart led them toward Henry's room. At the door, Dominic stopped. The distance between the hallway and the crib was only a few feet, but he seemed unable to cross it. Henry slept beneath a thin blanket. His dark hair stood in uneven curls. His face was flushed from fever. White tape covered part of his small hand. Dominic gripped the edge of the doorway. Claire watched the blood leave his face. The child looked unmistakably like him. The same dark brows, the same serious mouth. Even Henry's stillness resembled Dominic's, as if both father and son believed movement should have purpose. Caleb looked past Dominic into the room. For the first time since Claire had known him, the security chief seemed shocked. Dominic stepped inside. He moved slowly, almost carefully, as though a sudden motion might break whatever fragile permission had allowed him into the room. He reached the crib. His hand hovered above Henry. Claire saw uncertainty move through him. That frightened her more than anger would have. Dominic Vale did not hesitate. Not in business. Not in conflict. Not when making decisions that changed other people's lives. Now he looked at an 8-month-old child and did not know whether he had the right to touch him. Claire heard herself speak. "You can take his hand." Dominic looked at her. Then he lowered one finger into Henry's open palm. Henry stirred. His tiny fingers closed around Dominic's finger. Dominic's eyes shut. One breath left him unsteady and almost silent. "Hey, little man." His voice broke on the final word. Claire turned her face away. She had expected rage. She had expected accusation. She had not prepared herself to see Dominic hurt. He leaned closer to the crib. "I am your father," he whispered. Henry's fingers tightened. Dominic swallowed. "And I am sorry I am late." The apology was not for Claire. Not yet. Perhaps it never would be. Still, it was the most unguarded thing she had ever heard him say. For several minutes, no one spoke. The monitor continued its steady rhythm. Rain tapped against the window. Dr. Hart reviewed Henry's chart while Dominic stood beside the crib with one finger trapped inside his son's hand. Claire sank into a chair near the wall. Exhaustion pulled at her body, but she could not close her eyes. She watched Dominic memorize Henry, his hair, his hands, the shape of his ears, the rise and fall of his chest. A nurse entered to adjust the line. Dominic stepped back immediately. He asked questions in a low voice, the exact dosage, the possible complications, the relationship between fever and his family condition, the expected recovery time. He listened to every answer. Not once did he interrupt. Near dawn, Dr. Hart told them Henry would remain in the pediatric unit for observation. Dominic did not ask for a private room. He did not offer money. He simply returned to the crib. Claire remained near the window. After a long silence, Dominic spoke without looking at her. "When was he born?" Her throat tightened. "April 9th. What time?" 2:14 in the morning. Dominic nodded once. What did he weigh? 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Was it difficult? Claire studied him. His eyes remained on Henry, but tension had gathered along his jaw. "Yes." "How long? 18 hours. "Were you alone?" Mara came. Dominic's hand closed slowly at his side. "I should have been there." Claire looked down at her hands. "You made me believe you would never want to be." He turned. "I said children were dangerous in my life. You said they made men weak. I never said I would abandon my own. You never gave me a reason to believe you could love a child without building walls around him." Anger flashed across Dominic's face. "You decided that for me." Claire stood. "And you decided everything for me when we were married." His voice lowered. "This is not about our marriage. It became about our marriage the moment you asked why I did not tell you." Dominic stepped closer. Mara appeared in the doorway, watching them carefully. Dominic noticed but did not stop. "You carried my child. You gave birth to him. You watched him grow for 8 months while I did not know he existed." Claire's eyes burned. "I was afraid. Of me." "Yes." The answer landed with visible force. Dominic looked away for 1 second. When he returned his gaze to her, the anger had changed. It was no longer clean. Pain moved beneath it. "You should have told me. You should have become someone I could tell." Henry shifted in the crib. Both of them turned toward him. The argument ended because their son made one small sound. For the next 5 days, Dominic remained at the hospital. At first, Claire assumed he stayed because he refused to leave anything unfinished. Dominic did not abandon negotiations. He did not accept uncertainty. He remained until the world bent toward the outcome he had chosen. By the 3rd day, Claire understood that this was different. Dominic stayed because Henry had wrapped one fever-warmed hand around his finger and changed the center of his life. He slept in a chair. He conducted business calls from the corridor. He sent Caleb back to New Orleans twice but refused to go himself. When Henry woke crying during the 2nd night, Claire moved toward the crib. Dominic was closer. He reached down, then stopped. His hands hovered. "Can I?" Claire stared at him. The question was quiet. Not a command. Not an assumption. A request. Henry cried again. Claire nodded. Dominic slid one hand beneath the baby's neck and the other beneath his body. His movements were stiff and careful. He lifted Henry against his chest. The baby continued to fuss. "Hold him closer," Claire said. "He likes pressure." Dominic adjusted his grip. "Like this. A little higher." Henry turned his face into Dominic's shirt. His cries softened, then stopped. Dominic froze. Claire watched the moment move through him. A child trusted him without knowing his name, his power, or the fear attached to it. Henry needed only warmth, a heartbeat, and arms that did not let go. Dominic looked down at him, his expression opened in a way Claire had never seen. Caleb entered the room carrying coffee and stopped near the door. Dominic did not notice. Claire did. Caleb looked at his employer holding the baby, then at Claire. Something in his face shifted. Not trust. Perhaps understanding. By the fourth day, Dominic knew the nurses by name. He learned which monitor sound meant Henry had moved and which meant a nurse would enter quickly. He learned how to warm a bottle and test the milk against his wrist. He changed his first diaper with the serious concentration of a man reviewing a dangerous contract. A nurse watched him struggle with the small adhesive tabs. "You can loosen your shoulders, Mr. Vale." Dominic did not look up. "I am fine." "You look like the diaper threatened your family. It has poor construction." Claire laughed before she could stop herself. Dominic turned toward her. For 1 second, the hospital room felt like their old kitchen on a Sunday morning. The feeling passed quickly. Still, Claire carried it with her. On the 5th afternoon, she returned from speaking with Dr. Hart and found Dominic asleep in the chair. His suit jacket hung over the back. His tie was gone. Henry rested against his chest beneath a pale blue blanket. A stain of formula marked Dominic's white shirt. Claire stood in the doorway. Dominic opened his eyes. "You are staring. You have formula on a shirt that probably costs more than my monthly rent." He glanced down at the stain, then at Henry. "Worth it." The words were soft. Claire looked away before her expression revealed too much. Henry was discharged 2 days later. Dr. Hart gave them instructions about fever management, follow-up cardiac testing, and signs of infection. Dominic listened as though each sentence were law. He arranged for a specialist in Asheville to examine Henry before they left the hospital. Claire did not object. Outside, the storm had passed. The morning sky was pale and cold. Dominic carried Henry's car seat toward the entrance. Claire followed with the diaper bag. At the curb, a black sport utility vehicle waited. Her old sedan sat farther down the lot beneath a tree. Dominic looked at it. "No." Claire stopped. "Know what Henry is not riding in that car. That car brought him here. That does not make it safe. It passed inspection. It has bald rear tires." Claire looked toward the vehicle. "You checked my tires, I have eyes. You have men, I have concern." She stepped closer. "You do not get to arrive after missing 8 months and begin issuing orders." Dominic looked down at Henry, then back at Claire. "I did not miss them." His voice became quieter. "They were taken from me." Claire had no answer that did not sound like an excuse. Dominic saw that. After a moment, he said, "Drive your car. I will follow. You do not need to follow me." "Yes." He secured Henry into the sedan himself, checked the straps twice, then stepped away. "I do." Claire drove home with Dominic's black vehicle behind her. When she reached her apartment, the building seemed smaller than it had that morning. Dominic entered carrying Henry. His presence altered the room immediately. The low ceiling, the second-hand furniture, the bottles drying beside the sink, the unpaid bills stacked near the microwave. Claire saw every flaw through his eyes. "Do not start," she said. Dominic looked at her. "I have not said anything. You are looking. I am allowed to look. You are judging." "No." His gaze settled on a notice from the power company. "I am understanding." Claire took Henry from him. "We have been fine." Dominic removed his coat and placed it over the back of a chair. You were one emergency away from losing everything. That is not fair. No. He looked directly at her. It is not. Caleb entered behind him carrying a leather folder. Claire's stomach tightened. Dominic took the folder and placed it on the coffee table. What is that confirmation of paternity? My medical disclosures. A temporary custody proposal. Financial records. Assessments from attorneys in North Carolina and Louisiana. The room seemed to lose air. You prepared legal documents while Henry was in the hospital. I prepared options. Claire held Henry closer. You prepared to take him. Dominic's gaze dropped to her arms. I can petition for temporary custody. Her face went cold. You are threatening me. I am telling you what the law allows. You concealed my child from me. You failed to notify me when he was born. You did not disclose my family medical history until his life was in danger. I was protecting him. Dominic's expression hardened. From his father, from your world. He nearly died in yours. The words cut deeper because part of them was true. Claire sat on the edge of the sofa. Henry stirred against her shoulder. You cannot take my baby. Dominic remained standing. He is not only your baby. Claire looked up. For a moment, Dominic appeared exactly as he had during their marriage. Powerful, certain, too large for the room. Then he saw fear in her face. He sat in the chair across from her, lowering himself until they were nearly at eye level. I do not want to separate Henry from you. That is generous. I mean it. Then why bring custody papers into my home, because I will not return to New Orleans and wait for you to decide whether I am allowed to be his father? Claire looked down at Henry. Dominic leaned forward. Come with me. No. Hear the proposal. I heard proposals from you for 2 years. They always ended with me surrendering something. A 3-month arrangement. Claire looked at him. Dominic opened the folder. Joint legal custody. Independent representation for you. A pediatric cardiologist in New Orleans. A trust in Henry's name. Separate finances. Separate rooms. And where do I fit inside this generous plan? Vale Maritime needs legal counsel. Claire laughed once. You want me on your payroll? I want you working on legitimate contracts. Compliance insurance shipping law. Legitimate. Yes. That word sounds strange in your mouth. His expression did not change. You are good at what you do. You want me close. Yes. The honesty silenced her. Dominic continued. I want Henry where I can protect him. I want his mother where no one can reach her to get to him. And I want the months I lost to be the last thing you ever hide from me. That evening, after Dominic left 2 security men outside the building despite Claire's objections, Mara came over. She found Claire sitting on the floor beside Henry's crib. He wants us to move to New Orleans. Mara lowered herself beside her. Of course he does. He is threatening custody. Of course he is. Claire looked at her. You are not helping. I am trying not to say I warned you. I know what he is. Mara's expression softened. Do you? Claire looked through the crib bars. Henry slept with one fist beside his cheek. I saw him hold Henry. That does not erase the rest. No. Claire pressed her forehead against the wooden rail. But it was real. Mara was silent for a moment. I believe that. Claire turned. You do? I believe Dominic loves his son. Dangerous men can love deeply. That is what makes them dangerous in another way. Claire closed her eyes. I am tired. I know. No. I am tired in places sleep does not reach. Her voice broke. I am tired of bills. I am tired of being afraid every time Henry coughs. I am tired of carrying every decision alone. Mara took her hand. Then do not let Dominic replace you. What do I do? Make him stand beside you. The next evening, Dominic returned at 6. Claire waited in the living room with Henry on her hip and a written list in her hand. Dominic noticed the paper immediately. You made terms. I learned from you. He removed his coat. Read them. Claire took a breath. Joint legal custody. Equal authority over medical care, education, and travel. Agreed. My work remains completely legal. Agreed. My own bank account. Yes, my own attorney before I sign anything permanent. Of course, no monitoring my personal calls. Dominic paused. Claire held his gaze. Agreed. If there is a threat involving Henry, you tell me. Not after you solve it. Not when you decide I can handle it. Immediately. The room grew still. Dominic looked toward the window. Claire continued. No blood on your hands, followed by gifts on the table. His eyes returned to hers. Agreed. She looked down at the final line. If I decide to leave you, do not stop me. With Henry, yes. No. The answer came without hesitation. Claire lowered the page. Then none of this means anything. It means I will respect your choices until they remove my son from my life. Our son. Our son, Dominic corrected. If you run with him again, I will come after you. Claire felt the old walls closing around her. You are doing it again. Doing what calling fear love. Dominic's expression tightened. You think I felt powerful in that hospital? Claire said nothing. He stepped closer, then stopped before entering the space around her. I saw my son connected to machines. I did not know his birthday. I did not know what song calmed him. I did not know how he liked to be held. His voice roughened. I was a stranger to my own child. Claire's eyes filled. I know. You did that. Yes. The admission changed something between them. Claire looked down at Henry. I should have told you. Dominic remained silent. But you should have given me one reason to believe he could have a life with you that was not built behind locked gates. Dominic closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the anger had softened into exhaustion. I cannot promise normal. I know. I cannot promise danger will never come near him. I know. I can promise it reaches me first. Claire hated that the words comforted her. She placed the page on the table. 3 months. Dominic studied her. We live in New Orleans for 3 months. We complete the custody agreement with both attorneys present. I keep my independence. You do not threaten to take Henry unless I actually place him in danger. And if you want to leave after 3 months, we discuss it through our lawyers. Dominic's jaw tightened. That is not a promise, I will agree. No. Claire looked at him. It is a promise I will not disappear. That mattered. She saw it in his face. Dominic nodded once. 3 months. 2 days later, Claire packed the apartment where she had become a mother. Henry's clothes filled one suitcase. Her own filled another. Mara wrapped Claire's coffee mugs in newspaper while Dominic's men carried boxes down the stairs. Claire stood in the empty nursery holding Henry's first sleeper. Dominic appeared in the doorway with Henry in his arms. We can wait another day, he said. Claire shook her head. If I wait, I may change my mind. I know. She folded the sleeper and placed it inside her bag. Outside, 2 black vehicles waited along the curb. Dominic carried Henry down the stairs. Claire followed with the diaper bag over one shoulder and the key to her apartment pressed into her palm. At the entrance, she looked back once. The uneven floors, the narrow hallway, the window where morning light had fallen across Henry's crib. This place had been difficult, lonely, and entirely hers. She placed the key through the landlord's mail slot. Dominic secured Henry into the car seat and checked the straps twice. Claire climbed into the back seat beside her son. Dominic closed the door gently and took the front passenger seat. As the vehicle pulled away, Claire watched Asheville disappear behind wet glass. Henry kicked his feet and reached toward the back of Dominic's seat. Dominic turned immediately. Their son smiled at him. Claire looked beyond them toward the road stretching south. By nightfall, the mountains would be behind them, and the river city she had escaped would surround her again. By the time New Orleans appeared beyond the windshield, Henry had fallen asleep with one hand curled around the strap of his car seat. Claire remained awake. The city rose slowly out of the gray afternoon, first as bridges and distant towers, then as church spires, old brick buildings, and the dark ribbon of the Mississippi bending through everything. Humidity pressed against the windows. The air looked heavier here, as if even the sky carried memory. Dominic turned from the front seat for the 6th time in less than an hour. His gaze moved over Henry's face, then settled briefly on Claire. "He is breathing," she said. Dominic looked back toward the road. "I know. You keep checking." "I said I know." Claire watched the side of his face. He had spent most of the drive taking calls in a low voice, shipping delays, port schedules, a meeting with union representatives, a problem at a warehouse near Baton Rouge. Every conversation ended the moment Henry made a sound. That was new. The vehicle turned away from the interstate and entered the older part of the city. Live oaks arched above the streets. Their branches carried curtains of moss that moved in the wind like pale smoke. Claire recognized the route before Dominic said anything. They were not going to the Garden District house. Her stomach tightened anyway. The driver turned onto a private street near the river and stopped beneath the covered entrance of a limestone building. 2 security men waited near the doors. A second vehicle pulled in behind them. Claire looked at Dominic. "This is the apartment." "Yes." "Not the house, no." Why Dominic opened his door. "Because I thought returning there would be difficult." The answer was quieter than she expected. Claire looked through the glass at him. Dominic had once believed discomfort was something to solve with money or command. He had rarely considered that a place could hold pain no amount of renovation could remove. He opened her door. "This is temporary," Claire said. His expression remained calm. 3 months. "You remember the agreement? I remember every word." She studied him, searching for the familiar resistance beneath his voice. Dominic leaned closer, keeping enough distance that she did not feel trapped. "I said I would not force you back into the house where our marriage ended." Claire looked away first. Henry stirred. Dominic's attention shifted immediately. He moved around the vehicle and opened the rear door. His hands were careful as he loosened the straps. Henry blinked awake. For a moment he looked confused. Then he saw Dominic. His face brightened. Dominic stopped moving. The reaction still surprised him. "Hello, little man." Henry reached toward him. Dominic lifted him from the seat and held him against his chest. Claire stepped onto the pavement with the diaper bag over her shoulder. The building staff greeted Dominic by name. No one asked who Claire was. They already knew. That knowledge followed her through the lobby and into the private elevator. Dominic stood beside her, holding Henry. Caleb remained near the doors. The silence lasted until the elevator began to rise. Claire looked at Caleb. "You can call me Claire." Caleb's eyes shifted toward Dominic. Dominic did not hesitate. "Call her Claire." Caleb gave one small nod. Claire. It was not warmth, but it was something. The elevator opened directly into the apartment. Claire stepped inside and stopped. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the river. Late afternoon light moved across pale wood floors and cream-colored walls. The furniture was elegant without appearing untouched. Books filled shelves along one wall. Fresh flowers stood on the kitchen island. The place was beautiful. That made her distrust it immediately. Dominic carried Henry toward the hallway. Claire followed. The first bedroom had been prepared for her. Her favorite novels were arranged beside the bed. The blue mug from Asheville sat on the dresser. She picked it up. "You had your men unpack my things." They were careful. That was not the concern. Dominic's jaw shifted. "I wanted you to arrive somewhere ready. Ready according to you." Henry patted Dominic's collar. Dominic looked down at him. The argument lost its sharpest edge. He crossed the hall and opened another door. The nursery was painted soft green. A wooden crib stood near the inner wall. Drawers were filled with folded clothes. Diapers were stacked beside a changing table. A mobile of small white boats turned slowly above the crib. Claire entered the room. Her fingers touched a sweater folded inside the top drawer. The fabric was softer than anything she had bought Henry. She hated that part of her wanted him to have it. "You prepared this while he was in the hospital?" "Yes." "Before I agreed to come?" "Yes." She turned. Dominic stood in the doorway with Henry resting against one shoulder. "You were already planning to bring him here." "I was planning for every outcome." "He is not an outcome." Dominic's expression tightened. "I know. Do you?" Henry reached toward the small boats turning above the crib. Dominic stepped closer so he could touch them. The baby smiled. Claire watched Dominic's face soften. For a few seconds the room belonged to Henry rather than to their argument. Dominic placed him carefully inside the crib. Henry immediately rolled onto his stomach and grabbed at the sheet. Claire moved beside him. "He will try to pull himself up. I had the mattress lowered." "Of course you did." Dominic looked at her. "I read the safety recommendations." She almost smiled. He noticed. Neither mentioned it. The first week became a study in adjustment. Claire worked from the dining table while Henry slept. Vale Maritime sent contracts through a secure legal portal. Insurance agreements, vendor disputes, employment policies, port compliance documents. She read every page, expecting to find hidden clauses or false entities. The work was legitimate. That should have reassured her. Instead, it made her search harder. Dominic left the apartment before 7 each morning. He returned at 6 in the evening. Always 6. No matter how many calls waited or how many men wanted his attention, he entered the apartment at the same hour. By the 4th day, Henry began expecting him. At 5:58, the baby would turn toward the elevator. At 6, the doors opened. Dominic appeared with his tie loosened and his expression still carrying the weight of the outside world. Then Henry squealed. Everything in Dominic changed. He lowered himself to the floor before removing his jacket. "There he is." Henry crawled toward him with determined, uneven movements. Dominic caught him and lifted him into the air. Henry laughed. Claire watched from the kitchen. She had once seen Dominic receive news that one of his ships had been seized by federal customs. He had not reacted. Now a baby's laugh could make him forget the room around him. It should have made Claire feel safe. Instead, it reminded her how much he now had to lose. One evening, she found Dominic on the nursery floor attempting to change Henry's diaper. Henry twisted away with both feet in the air. Dominic held the clean diaper in one hand and looked at Claire. He does this deliberately. He is 8 months old. He understands strategy. He wants the lotion bottle. Dominic glanced at the bottle near the changing mat. Henry reached for it. Dominic moved it closer. Henry became still. Claire leaned against the door. "You negotiated with a baby. It worked. You bribed him. Also worked." Henry grabbed the bottle and smiled. Dominic secured the diaper. For a moment, Claire forgot to guard her expression. Dominic looked up. "What, nothing? You were smiling?" "I was not." "You were." Claire turned away. "You still put the diaper on backward." Dominic looked down. Henry kicked both feet. The quiet domestic rhythm settled around them slowly. Dominic read to Henry every night. He chose serious books with long sentences and seemed offended when the baby tried to eat the pages. Claire would sit in the chair by the window pretending to review documents. She listened to Dominic's voice soften over stories about lost animals, brave children, and homes found after long journeys. Sometimes Henry fell asleep before the story ended. Dominic always finished the page. During the day, Claire began attending meetings at Vale Maritime. The headquarters occupied a restored warehouse near the river. Glass offices overlooked loading docks where cranes moved containers above the water. Employees became careful when she entered. Some remembered her as Dominic's wife. Others knew she had returned with his child. No one asked questions. Dominic introduced her as outside legal counsel, not his former wife, not Henry's mother. Counsel. Claire appreciated the distinction. In conference rooms, Dominic listened when she spoke. The first serious disagreement came over a vendor contract linked to a newly formed company in Mississippi. Claire placed the document on Dominic's desk. This company has existed for 7 months. So, it has no history, no audited statements, and a registered address belonging to an accounting office. Dominic leaned back in his chair. The owner has experience. Then let him submit the records. The shipment is time-sensitive. That is not my problem. His eyes narrowed slightly. Everything connected to Vale Maritime is your problem while you are being paid to protect it. I am protecting it by refusing to approve this. Silence settled over the office. Caleb stood near the window, watching both of them. Claire expected Dominic to overrule her. Instead, he picked up the phone. "Delay the contract," a voice answered on the other end. Dominic continued. "Tell them legal requires full disclosure." He ended the call. Claire stared. "What? You accepted the revision? You were right. You hate being corrected." "I hate being corrected by people who are wrong. And when they are right," Dominic's gaze moved over her face. "I try to learn." The air changed. Claire looked down at the contract. "That may be the closest thing to humility I have ever heard from you. Do not become accustomed to it." His mouth curved faintly. For one dangerous second, they were husband and wife again. The feeling passed, but not completely. The threat appeared on the 8th morning. Claire wanted to take Henry outside. The apartment had begun to feel too still. The river beyond the windows looked close enough to touch, but every door opened into another controlled space. Dominic assigned 2 security men to accompany them. Claire argued. He did not change his mind. "They will remain at a distance. I know how your men define distance. Henry needs protection. He also needs sunlight. He can have both." Claire looked at the guards waiting near the elevator. "This is what I meant about a prison." Dominic held her gaze. "A prison does not allow you to leave. A prison can have very polite doors." He said nothing. Claire took Henry anyway. The park sat several blocks from the apartment near the riverfront. Morning light moved through the trees. Street musicians played near a row of cafes. A woman jogged past, pushing twins in a stroller. For 10 minutes, Claire felt almost ordinary. Henry sat in a baby swing wearing a navy jacket. Each time Claire pushed him, he laughed. The sound loosened something inside her. Then she noticed the man across the street. He wore a dark green shirt despite the cool air. A silver snake curved behind his left ear. He was not watching Claire. He was watching Henry. 2 other men stood near a parked car. One pretended to check his phone. The other made no effort to hide his interest. Claire's hands closed around the swing chains. Henry kicked his feet, waiting for another push. One of Dominic's guards stepped closer. "Claire." She did not look at him. "Do you see them?" "Yes. Take Henry." Claire lifted him from the swing. Her movements were too quick. Henry began to fuss. The guard positioned himself between Claire and the street. The second guard spoke into his sleeve. The man with the snake tattoo smiled. Not at the guards, at Claire. Her blood went cold. She held Henry against her chest and walked toward the apartment. Every passing car sounded too loud. Every open doorway seemed to conceal someone. By the time the elevator doors closed behind them, her hands were shaking. Dominic arrived at 6. Henry crawled toward him as usual. Dominic lifted him, smiling, until he saw Claire's face. What happened? There were men at the park. His hand stilled against Henry's back. Mine, no. Describe them. Claire did. The green shirt, the parked car, the silver snake behind one man's ear. Dominic's expression emptied. Claire recognized that look. It was the face he wore when emotion became dangerous. He took out his phone and typed a message. Dominic. He sent it. Who were they? He typed another. Dominic. His gaze lifted. For 1 second she saw him deciding how much truth to give. Claire's voice hardened. You promised. Dominic put the phone away. The symbol belongs to Victor Serrano. Who is he? He controls freight routes through parts of Texas and Mexico. You called him a competitor. He is. A competitor watched our son at a park. Henry touched Dominic's chin. Dominic shifted him higher. Serrano has been trying to move cargo through Vale terminals without inspection. What kind of cargo? Drugs? Weapons? People? Claire stared at him. And you refused? Yes, because it was illegal. Dominic's eyes held hers. Because he would have owned every route he touched. The answer was not noble. At least it was honest. Claire crossed her arms. How did he find Henry? Dominic walked toward the windows. When I flew to Asheville, I broke patterns I had kept for years. I moved a medical specialist. I changed aircraft. I pulled Caleb from a port meeting. I showed urgency. Men like Serrano notice urgency. Yes, you led them to us. Dominic's shoulders tightened. I revealed that something mattered. Claire looked at Henry. The baby rested against Dominic, unaware of the fear filling the room. You said coming here would make him safer. It does. They found him. And if you had stayed in Asheville, they would have found him without knowing I was watching. You do not know that. I know how men like Serrano think. You mean men like you? Dominic turned. Yes. The word stopped her. He did not defend himself. He did not soften the truth. Claire's anger remained, but it had nowhere clean to land. What happens now? We move. We're my property near Lake Pontchartrain. Claire laughed once. Of course you have another property. 40 acres, controlled access, a private road, reinforced security, a fortress, a home, with guards, with Henry alive inside it. The room went silent. Claire looked at her son. Fear moved beneath her anger, cold and steady. They left the next morning. The estate stood beyond a line of cypress trees north of the city. A stone wall surrounded the property. Cameras turned along the road as the vehicle approached. The gates opened before they stopped. Claire looked out at the guards positioned near the entrance. Does anyone live here without a weapon? Dominic glanced toward her. You. That is not comforting. The house rose beyond the trees in pale stone and dark glass. It was larger than the apartment, but less ornate than the Garden District mansion. A wide terrace faced the lake. Wind moved through tall grass beyond the garden. Inside the rooms were warm. Books filled the library. A fire burned in the main room. The kitchen smelled of coffee and fresh bread. Claire had expected cold marble and empty halls. The comfort unsettled her. Her bedroom stood across from Henry's nursery. Dominic's room was farther down the same corridor. Not too close. Not far enough to pretend they were strangers. Claire walked through the nursery. The windows were reinforced. A small camera sat above the door. She turned. Is that recording only the hallway? What about inside? No camera. She looked at him. Why not? Dominic shifted Henry on his hip. Because you said you did not want to live under surveillance. The answer surprised her. You listened. I said I was trying. Claire looked toward the window. 2 guards crossed the lawn. Trying would feel different without armed men outside. Dominic's voice remained calm. The men at the park were real. I know. So are the guards. The estate revealed its secrets over the following days. Panic buttons were hidden near doorways. Reinforced shutters could close over the windows. A security room occupied part of the lower level. Claire received access codes to every family area. One door in the basement remained locked. She noticed. She said nothing. Dominic continued returning at 6. Sometimes he worked from the library so he could remain near Henry. Claire reviewed contracts at a desk near the windows while Henry played on a blanket between them. The site looked domestic. The armed guard outside ruined the illusion. One afternoon, Dominic placed a file beside Claire's laptop. I need your opinion. She opened it. The documents involved a storage facility near Gulfport. Payments had moved through 3 companies before reaching the property owner. Claire studied the structure. This was designed to hide the source. Yes. Your source. Not anymore. She looked at him. What does that mean? It means the arrangement ends. Because I found it. Because I should have ended it before you had to. Claire closed the file. Who are you? Dominic leaned against the desk. The same man. No. Her eyes moved toward Henry. You are not. Dominic followed her gaze. Henry sat chewing the ear of a stuffed bear. When Dominic spoke again, his voice was quiet. I did not know I was allowed to become someone else. Claire looked at him. Before she could answer, Caleb entered the room. We have a car on the North Road. Dominic's expression changed immediately. Same one 3rd time today. Claire stood. Dominic looked toward Henry. Take him upstairs. She did not move. You promised to tell me. I am telling you. Then tell me everything. Caleb's eyes shifted between them. Dominic exhaled slowly. Black sedan. Louisiana plates. It has passed the outer road 3 times. Do you know who is inside? Not yet. Is it Serrano? Possibly. Claire picked Henry up. Dominic stepped closer. Stay away from the windows. The old command in his voice returned. Claire felt herself tense. Dominic saw it. His tone changed. Please. The single word mattered. Claire carried Henry upstairs. That evening she called Mara from her bedroom. I do not know what safety means anymore. Mara was quiet for a moment. Can you leave? I have the codes. That is not what I asked. Claire looked toward the hallway. Dominic sat in the nursery reading to Henry. His voice carried softly through the open door. I do not know. Claire, there are men watching the estate. Dominic's men. Not all of them. Mara cursed under her breath. Claire lowered her voice. If I leave, Henry may be more exposed. And if you stay... Claire watched Dominic turn a page. I may forget how to leave. 2 days later, Claire went into the city for a meeting with her attorney. Dominic assigned a driver and 2 guards. Afterward, she asked to stop at a pharmacy. One guard remained near the entrance. The other waited by the car. Claire bought diapers, baby lotion, and a prepaid phone. She hid the box beneath a package of wipes. She paid in cash from the account she had kept separate from Dominic. That night, after Henry fell asleep, Claire sat on the bathroom floor with the shower running. The phone glowed in her hand. She searched for the Federal Organized Crime tip line. For several minutes, she could not type. Then she wrote a message. Men connected to Victor Serrano watched an infant near the New Orleans riverfront. One man had a silver snake tattoo behind his left ear. A black sedan has also been seen near a private property north of the city. She did not include Dominic's name. She did not need to. The response came the following afternoon. A woman called from a blocked number. Claire Bennett. Claire stood near the library windows. "Yes. My name is Rebecca Sloan. I would like to discuss the message you sent." Claire looked toward the hallway. Dominic was outside with Henry, walking slowly along the terrace. "What agency? Federal Bureau of Investigation?" Claire's grip tightened around the phone. "I am not giving you information about Dominic Vale." Agent Sloan's voice remained calm. "I did not ask you to. Not yet." A pause. "Ms. Bennett, Victor Serrano has been expanding his organization through Gulf shipping routes for 3 years. Your son has now appeared in photographs recovered from one of Serrano's men." The room seemed to tilt. "What photographs? We should meet." Claire left the estate the next morning under the excuse of another legal appointment. She met Sloan at a quiet cafe near Tulane University. The agent wore a gray suit and carried no visible weapon. She looked ordinary enough to disappear inside any crowd. That made Claire distrust her. Sloan placed a photograph on the table. Henry sat in the swing near the river. His mouth was open in laughter. A red circle surrounded his face. Claire's fingers went cold. "Where did you get this?" "A phone recovered during a traffic stop." "Who had it?" "A known Serrano associate." Claire looked at the image again. The ordinary joy of that morning had been turned into evidence. Sloan leaned forward. "Victor Serrano does not care that your child is innocent. What does he want? Dominic's terminals, his routes, his cooperation. And if Dominic refuses," Sloan did not answer immediately. Claire understood. "What do you want from me? Names, vehicles, locations, anything you hear involving Serrano. You want me to spy inside Dominic's house. I want you to help us stop the men who are watching your son." Claire pushed the photograph back. "You are investigating Dominic too. We investigate patterns. That means yes. Dominic Vale has operated beyond the reach of federal prosecution for years. I am not helping you arrest him." Sloan studied her. "You still love him?" Claire hated the certainty in her voice. "I am here because of Henry." "Then listen as his mother. Serrano will use the child to force Dominic into a mistake. We can prevent that if we know when and where the pressure is coming." "What happens if Dominic finds out?" Sloan's expression did not change. "You tell him you did what you had to do." Claire gave a quiet, bitter laugh. "You have never been loved by a man like Dominic." "No." Sloan held her gaze. "But I have interviewed women who confused being guarded with being safe." Claire left without agreeing. The photograph remained inside her purse. That night, she sat in Henry's nursery after he fell asleep. Dominic appeared in the doorway. "You saw your attorney?" "Yes." It was not entirely a lie. His eyes narrowed slightly. He did not challenge her. Claire looked down at Henry. Dominic entered the room and stood beside the crib. "He is breathing," he said. "I know. You keep checking. So do you." Dominic crouched beside her chair. In the low light, the hard lines of his face softened. "I thought if I never had this, no one could take it from me." Claire looked at him. "And now?" His eyes moved toward Henry. "Now I understand I was already losing something. I simply did not know his name." The words opened something inside her. For one moment, Claire wanted to tell him everything. The photograph, Agent Sloan, the prepaid phone hidden inside her suitcase. Then Dominic reached into the crib and touched 2 fingers to Henry's blanket. Claire remained silent. The second call from Sloan came the next day. Claire answered from the garden. "We have reason to believe Serrano is moving men closer to the property. What do you need?" "Anything." "Dominic says about a meeting." Claire looked across the lawn. Dominic stood beneath a tree with Henry balanced on his feet. He held both of the baby's hands while Henry attempted an uneven step. Henry laughed. Dominic smiled. Claire turned away. "I will only give you information about Serrano. That is enough." The double life began quietly. Claire sent Sloan a partial license plate from a car near the estate road. She shared the name of a warehouse Dominic mentioned during a security call. She reported a man Caleb identified as a Serrano courier. Nothing about Vale Maritime. Nothing about Dominic's legitimate business. Nothing that would place him directly in federal hands. That was how Claire justified it. Still, each message felt like a betrayal. The more she lied, the more Dominic changed. He gave her full access to the security reports involving Henry. He told her when the threat level increased. He asked before adding guards to her schedule. He stopped saying "my son" when angry. He began saying "our son" even when no one was arguing. One evening, Henry pulled himself upright beside the coffee table. Claire reached toward him. Dominic held out both hands from across the rug. Henry let go. He took one unsteady step, then another. Claire stopped breathing. Henry took a third step and fell into Dominic's arms. Dominic lifted him as Henry laughed. He walked. Claire whispered. Dominic looked at her over Henry's head. "We saw it." Claire's eyes filled. "We." Later, after Henry slept, Dominic poured 2 glasses of bourbon in the library. He offered one to Claire. She took it but did not drink. "Do you still believe family makes a man weak?" Dominic looked into his glass. "Yes." Her expression closed. Then he continued. "But I was wrong about what weakness means." Claire waited. "Loving someone gives the world a place to hurt you. That sounds like the same belief." "It is not." Dominic set the glass down. "It also gives you a reason to survive being hurt." Claire looked away. Upstairs, the prepaid phone vibrated inside her suitcase. She waited until Dominic left the room. The message from Sloan was brief. "Serrano is preparing direct contact with Dominic. We need details immediately." Claire deleted the message. Her hand shook. The next morning, she found Dominic in the courtyard teaching Henry to walk across the grass. Dominic looked up. There was no calculation in his face, only peace. Claire stood in the doorway with Sloane's warning burning inside her pocket. Then a shadow moved across the nursery window above them. Claire looked up. A small black object hovered beyond the roofline. For 1 second it resembled a bird holding itself against the wind. Then it shifted sideways without moving its wings. Claire's blood went cold. She ran upstairs. Henry's clean clothes were still spread across the changing table when she reached the nursery. A second drone appeared above the trees. Then a third. The house changed without warning. Locks clicked inside the walls. The warm lights faded to a low white glow. A calm voice spoke through hidden speakers. "Claire, remain away from the windows." Men moved across the lawn below. Dominic's guards took positions along the walls and near the garden. A sharp crack broke the morning. One drone fell beyond the trees. Henry startled and began to cry. Claire lifted him and turned her body between him and the glass. Another crack. The second drone dropped. The third climbed quickly and disappeared toward the lake. The nursery door opened. Dominic entered with his phone in one hand. His eyes went first to Henry, then to Claire. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Were you near the window?" "No." He crossed the room and touched Henry's back. The baby cried against Claire's shoulder. Dominic reached for him, then stopped. "May I?" Claire handed Henry over. Dominic held him close. Henry's cries softened into small, frightened breaths. Dominic looked toward the window. They were testing response time. Claire stared at him. "They were outside our son's room." "Yes." "What does that mean?" "It means Serrano is finished watching." Claire's mouth went dry. Dominic kissed the top of Henry's head. "He wants a meeting. Do not go." The words left her before she could measure them. Dominic looked at her. For 1 second, something warm and painful moved through his face. Then he looked back at Henry. If I refuse, he comes closer to this house. There has to be another way. There are always other ways. Then choose one. Dominic's hand spread protectively across Henry's back. Most of them leave more bodies. Claire watched him hold their son beneath the silent security lights. The prepaid phone felt heavy inside her pocket. Downstairs, men prepared maps, vehicles, and weapons. Inside the nursery, Henry rested his cheek against Dominic's chest, while Claire stood between two dangerous truths, unable to decide which one frightened her more. Claire did not move until Dominic carried Henry from the nursery. The security lights remained white and cold. Somewhere below, doors sealed and radios crackled through the walls. The estate no longer felt like a home pretending to be a fortress. It had become exactly what Dominic had built it to be. A place designed to survive an attack. Henry rested against Dominic's shoulder, one small fist wrapped in the collar of his shirt. His crying had stopped, but his breathing remained uneven. Dominic looked at Claire. Come downstairs. Henry should not be near the security room. He will not be. Then where are you taking him to Mrs. Alvarez? The housekeeper had worked for Dominic's family for more than 20 years. Claire had seen the older woman calm Henry through teething pain stomach trouble, and one terrible afternoon when he refused to sleep. Claire trusted her. That did not make letting go easier. They walked together through the silent hallway. 2 guards stood near the stairs. Another waited beside a reinforced door Claire had never seen open. Mrs. Alvarez appeared from the family room. Her gray hair was tied behind her neck. She wore a dark dress and flat shoes, as if armed men moving through the halls were an ordinary interruption to breakfast. Dominic handed Henry to her. Take him to the interior room. Mrs. Alvarez looked at Claire. You may come with us. Claire looked at Dominic. He was already turning toward the lower floor. No, she said. I need to hear this. Dominic stopped. For a second, she expected him to argue. Instead, he nodded. Stay beside me. Claire almost objected to the command. Then she saw the tension in his face. This was not the man who had once controlled which car she used or which door she entered. This was a father who had watched machines hover outside his son's window. Claire touched Henry's cheek before Mrs. Alvarez carried him away. I will be back. Henry reached for her. The motion nearly broke her resolve. Dominic watched her hand close around empty air. Then he opened the reinforced door. The security room occupied most of the lower level. No artwork hung on the walls. No rugs softened the concrete floor. Screens covered one side of the room, each displaying a different part of the property. The gate, the lake road, the tree line, the garden, the garage, the nursery hallway. Claire looked at the last image and felt cold. Caleb stood at a wide table covered with maps. His jacket was open, revealing the gun beneath his arm. 3 men worked at computers behind him. No one spoke when Dominic entered. Caleb touched one of the screens. A muddy road appeared beneath a line of trees. They launched from here. How long were they above the property? Dominic asked. 41 seconds before the first one went down. Too long. We had no warning from the outer sensors. Then the outer sensors failed. Caleb's mouth tightened. They came through a drainage road east of the lake. No cameras, no traffic. Dominic leaned over the table. How long were they outside the nursery? Caleb did not answer immediately. Dominic looked up. How long? 9 seconds. The room went still. Claire felt the number enter her body. 9 seconds. Long enough to photograph Henry. Long enough to study the glass. Long enough to measure the distance between the nursery and the nearest guard. Dominic's face did not change. That frightened every man in the room more than anger would have. Find the launch team. Already moving. Move faster. Caleb nodded. Then he looked toward Claire. Serrano sent a message before sunrise. Dominic straightened. What message? He wants a meeting. Where? An abandoned sugar warehouse near the river outside Baton Rouge. When tonight? Claire stared at Dominic. You already knew. The message came before I entered the nursery, and you were not going to tell me. I had not decided what to do. That has never stopped you from making a decision alone. Dominic turned toward her. Claire. No. You promised. Every man in the room suddenly became interested in the screens. Claire stepped closer to the table. You promised that if a threat involved Henry, you would tell me. I am telling you now. After drones appeared outside his window, Dominic's voice lowered. I came upstairs before I came here. She understood what he meant. Henry had come first. That should have mattered. It did matter. It did not remove the rest. What does Serrano want? She asked. 2 shipping terminals, access to Vale routes, control of certain inspections, and if you refuse, he makes the threat personal. It is already personal. Yes. Dominic looked at the screen showing the nursery hallway. That is why I have to end it. Claire felt the phone in her pocket. Agent Sloane's last message remained unanswered. She imagined the red circle around Henry's face. You cannot go alone. I will not. That is not what I meant. Dominic's gaze returned to hers. This is not a negotiation about us. It became about us when our son became part of his price. Caleb cleared his throat. Dominic, we need to prepare. Dominic did not look away from Claire. Give us the room. Caleb hesitated. Then he nodded to the others. The men left. The door closed. Claire stood across from Dominic with the table between them. Maps, photographs, and property lines separated them like evidence. You are walking into a trap, she said. Yes. The simplicity of the answer made her angry. And that does not frighten you? It does. Claire searched his face. Dominic rarely admitted fear. Then do not go. If I refuse, Serrano sends another message. Let the police handle him. Dominic gave her a tired look. The police do not control his people. The FBI might. Something flickered in his eyes. Claire felt her pulse change. Dominic watched her too carefully. Why did you say that? Because this is bigger than port security. That is not an answer. Claire looked toward the screens. She had lied so many times through silence that the difference between hiding and speaking had begun to feel thin. I know federal agents have been investigating Serrano, how it was in the news. No, it was not. Dominic stepped around the table. Claire held her ground. His voice remained quiet. How do you know? She could tell him. The phone rested against her leg. One movement would reveal everything. Then she remembered Sloane's warning. If Dominic knew before the meeting, he might change the location. He might refuse federal help. He might disappear Serrano through methods Claire could never defend. I assumed she said. Dominic stared at her. The lie settled between them. He knew something was wrong. He did not know what. Claire hated the small victory of keeping it hidden. Dominic walked toward a cabinet and opened it with his thumb. He removed a dark folder. What is that? He placed it on the table. Open it. Claire did. The first document carried her name. The second carried Henry's. She turned the pages slowly. Custody transfer in the event of Dominic's death. Access to accounts. Ownership shares placed in trust. Security instructions. Addresses of safe houses in 3 states. Names of doctors, attorneys, drivers, and pilots. A letter authorizing Caleb to follow Claire's decisions regarding Henry. Everything had been prepared. Everything except the possibility that Dominic might choose not to go. Claire looked up. You planned your death like a business transaction. I planned your survival. Do not say that as if it makes this better. It does not make it better. His voice was calm. It makes it prepared. I do not want prepared. She closed the folder. I want you not to go. Dominic went still. The screens cast pale light across his face. Say that again. Claire's throat tightened. I do not want Henry to lose you. Dominic moved closer. The table no longer stood between them. And you? She looked away. This is not about me. It is now. Claire's eyes burned. She had spent months trying to convince herself that her feelings were only fear, guilt, or memory. They were not. Dominic stood close enough to touch her, but he did not. Claire. She forced herself to meet his gaze. I do not know what Henry and I become if you do not come back. Something in Dominic's face broke open. His hand lifted, then stopped near her cheek. Claire closed the remaining distance. She pressed her forehead against his chest. For 1 second, Dominic did not move. Then his arms closed around her. He held her with a care that hurt more than force ever could. Claire listened to his heartbeat. Steady, alive, temporary. You come back, she whispered. Dominic rested his cheek against her hair. I will try. That is not enough. It is the only honest promise I have. Claire closed her eyes. The phone in her pocket felt like a second heartbeat. Dominic left the estate just before sunset. He wore a dark suit beneath a long coat. No tie, no visible weapon. Caleb waited beside the vehicle. Claire stood beneath the front portico holding Henry. The baby reached toward Dominic. Dominic crossed the space between them and took him. For several moments, father and son simply looked at each other. Henry touched Dominic's jaw. Dominic smiled faintly. You stay with your mother. Henry made a soft sound. Dominic kissed his forehead. Then he handed him back to Claire. His fingers remained against Henry's back for 1 extra second. Claire wanted to tell him everything. The federal agents, the messages, the location she had already confirmed with Sloan, the possibility that law enforcement would be surrounding the warehouse. She wanted Dominic to look at her without suspicion again. Instead, she said, Come home. Dominic looked into her eyes. I know what home means now. He entered the vehicle. Caleb took the passenger seat. The gates opened. Claire watched until the taillights disappeared beyond the trees. Then she carried Henry upstairs, placed him in Mrs. Alvarez's arms, and locked herself inside the bathroom. She turned on the shower. The prepaid phone shook in her hand. Agent Sloan answered immediately. Is he moving? Yes. Location. Claire closed her eyes. Old Fontaine Sugar Warehouse, east side of the river, near the abandoned rail spur. What time he should arrive before 8. Sloan began speaking to someone beside her. Claire gripped the phone. You promised he would not be the target. I promised Serrano would be our priority. That is not the same thing. It is the best I can offer. No. Claire's voice sharpened. You listen to me. Dominic is walking into that warehouse because Serrano threatened our child. If your agents use this to arrest him, I will deny every conversation we had. Your messages are recorded. Then I will tell every attorney and reporter in Louisiana that the FBI pressured a frightened mother by showing her photographs of her infant son. Silence. Claire continued. You protect Dominic long enough to get him out alive. Sloan exhaled. I cannot promise immunity. I did not ask for immunity. Claire looked at her reflection in the mirror. I asked you not to let him die. Another pause. We will move when Serrano's men expose their weapons, not before. If we move too early, he will run. If you move too late, Dominic will be dead. We know what we are doing. Claire thought of every person who had ever said those words before taking control from someone else. Do you? Sloan ended the call. The warehouse stood beside the river like the remains of a dead machine. Rain fell through holes in the roof. Rust covered the steel beams. Broken windows looked over dark water and the distant lights of industrial docks. Dominic entered through the main loading door with Caleb beside him. 4 Vale security men remained outside. Victor Serrano waited near the center of the warehouse. He wore a pale gray suit and no coat despite the cold. 6 armed men stood along the upper walkways. Others waited behind stacked machinery. Dominic counted them without moving his head. Serrano smiled. Dominic Vale. Victor. I expected more men. I expected a better building. Serrano laughed. The sound traveled through the empty space. You always did confuse arrogance with courage, and you always confused attention with power. Serrano's smile faded slightly. Caleb remained 1 step behind Dominic. His hand stayed near his jacket. Serrano gestured toward a metal table. A bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses waited there. Dominic did not approach. You wanted a meeting. I wanted you to understand the new reality. The reality where you send cameras to a child's window. Serrano's eyes sharpened. Your son is beautiful. The temperature of the room seemed to fall. Dominic's voice became almost gentle. Say one more word about him. Serrano studied him. Then he smiled again. There it is. What? The man beneath the legend. Dominic did not move. Serrano stepped closer to the table. For years, no one knew what Dominic Vale feared. Money did not move you. Prison did not move you. Death certainly did not move you. He poured whiskey into 1 glass. Then you flew across 3 states for a sick child. Dominic watched him. You mistook urgency for weakness. No. Serrano lifted the glass. I recognized leverage. Caleb's jaw tightened. Dominic's expression remained calm. What do you want 2 terminals? Full access through your inspection channels. No questions about cargo. No interference from your union men. No. Serrano took a drink. You should hear the rest. The answer will remain no. If you refuse, accidents begin. Dominic's eyes did not leave his face. Be specific. A driver looks away from the road. A guard forgets to lock a gate. A nurse enters the wrong dosage. Caleb moved. Dominic stopped him with 1 hand. Serrano continued. Children are fragile, Dominic. That is what makes them useful. Dominic stepped toward him. Every gun on the upper walkways shifted. Serrano raised 1 finger. Careful. Dominic stopped. You believe Henry makes me easier to control? He does. No. Dominic's voice carried through the warehouse. He makes me less interested in leaving enemies alive. Serrano's smile disappeared. The lights went out. The first shot came from above. Caleb struck Dominic's shoulder and drove him behind a steel column. Gunfire tore across the warehouse. Glass shattered. Dominic pulled a weapon from beneath his coat. Caleb fired twice toward the upper walkway. A body fell against the railing. East exit, Caleb shouted. No! Dominic looked toward the center of the warehouse. Serrano had vanished behind the machinery. Another burst of gunfire struck the column. Metal screamed. Dominic fired toward the muzzle flash. A man collapsed behind a crate. Caleb reached for his radio. Nothing answered. They are blocking the signal. Dominic looked toward the broken windows. Faint movement appeared beyond the river road. Not Vale men. Too many vehicles. Federal agents. Claire. The realization struck him with the same force as the bullet that entered his side. Dominic stumbled. Caleb caught him. Blood spread across his shirt. You are hit. I noticed. Caleb dragged him behind a loading platform. A gunman appeared near the stairs. Dominic fired. The man fell. Caleb looked toward the east exit. We move now. A shot struck Caleb near the shoulder. He went down. Dominic turned. Caleb's weapon slid across the concrete. Serrano's men began closing in. Dominic pressed 1 hand against the wound in his side. The old instinct rose inside him. Find Serrano. End the threat. Leave no one alive who knew Henry's name. Then Caleb tried to stand and collapsed. Dominic looked toward the shadows where Serrano had disappeared. Revenge waited there. So did the man who had watched his son. Dominic made his choice. He lifted Caleb's arm over his shoulder and pulled him toward the exit. Caleb groaned. "Leave me." "No, you can still get Serrano." Dominic dragged him another step. "You are coming home." The loading doors exploded inward. Federal agents entered beneath white lights and shouted commands. Gunfire answered from the upper walkways. Dominic pushed Caleb behind a concrete barrier. Agents moved across the warehouse. Serrano's men dropped weapons or ran toward the river. Dominic's vision blurred. He saw Victor Serrano sprint through a side door toward the dock. An agent followed. Dominic raised his weapon. The distance was too great. His hand shook from blood loss. For 1 second, Serrano turned. Their eyes met across the rain. Dominic could still fire. Instead, he lowered the weapon and pressed both hands against Caleb's wound. Federal agents caught Serrano before he reached the boat. Dominic heard the shouting, but it felt far away. He looked down at Caleb. "Stay awake." Caleb's face had gone pale. "You first." Dominic almost smiled. Then the warehouse tilted. He fell beside the man he had chosen to save. Claire reached the Baton Rouge hospital after midnight. Mrs. Alvarez stayed at the estate with Henry under guard. Claire had refused to bring him near another emergency room. She entered through a side entrance arranged by Agent Sloan. The agent waited near the surgical floor. Her suit was wet. Blood marked one sleeve, though Claire could not tell whose it was. "Where is Dominic?" "In surgery. Is he alive?" "Yes, that was not my question." Sloan looked at her. "The bullet damaged his liver. The doctors believe they controlled the bleeding." "Believe?" "He lost a great deal of blood." Claire pressed one hand against the wall. "And Caleb stable. Serrano. In custody." Claire closed her eyes. For 1 second, relief came. Then guilt followed. Sloan moved closer. "Your information saved lives." Claire opened her eyes. "Do not. What do not make this feel clean?" Sloan's expression changed. "You stopped an organized crime leader. I sent the father of my child into a building filled with guns. He was going whether you called us or not. That does not make me innocent." "No." Sloan's honesty hurt more than comfort would have. Claire sat in a chair outside surgery. Hours passed. The hospital sounds blurred together, shoes against the floor, a cart moving through the hall, a distant telephone. She remembered another waiting room in Asheville, another night beneath white lights. Then Dominic had crossed the country without knowing whether his son would live. Now Claire waited without knowing whether Henry still had a father. At 4 a.m, a surgeon entered. Claire stood. He survived the procedure. Her knees weakened. The surgeon continued speaking. Recovery, blood loss, risk of infection. Claire heard only survived. She covered her mouth. The first sound that left her was not a sob or a prayer. It was Dominic's name. He woke the following afternoon. Claire sat beside the bed. Machines surrounded him. A line ran into his arm. Bandages covered his side. Dominic opened his eyes slowly. His gaze moved across the room until it found her. "Henry's safe." His voice was rough. "Where?" "With Mrs. Alvarez." Dominic closed his eyes for 1 second. "And you?" Claire leaned closer. "I am here." "Good." The word was barely audible. His hand moved weakly across the blanket. Claire took it. Dominic looked at their joined hands, then at her face. "You knew." Claire stopped breathing. He did not need to explain. The federal agents, the timing, the warehouse. She could lie again. Instead, she whispered, "Rest." His fingers tightened around hers. "You knew." Claire looked toward the door. We will talk when you are stronger. Dominic's eyes remained open. That means yes. He released her hand. The distance between them returned before his body had even begun to heal. Dominic spent 11 days in the hospital. Claire remained near him, but the silence grew heavier. He asked about Henry. He spoke to doctors. He reviewed security reports with Caleb from separate rooms. He did not ask Claire about the FBI again. That restraint frightened her. When Dominic returned to the estate, Henry crawled across the entrance hall before anyone could stop him. Dominic lowered himself carefully despite the pain in his side. Henry reached him and placed both hands on his chest. Dominic closed his eyes. Claire watched from the doorway. The man who had nearly died held his son as though the child were the only proof that he had returned. For several days, the estate became quiet. Federal agents questioned Dominic through attorneys. Caleb recovered in a guest room. Serrano remained in custody. Claire began to believe Dominic might allow the secret to remain unspoken. Then one evening she entered the study and found the prepaid phone on the desk. Dominic stood near the window. Caleb was absent. No guards waited at the door. Only Claire and Dominic remained with the truth between them. How long, he asked. Claire closed the door. Since the men at the park. You contacted the FBI. Yes. You gave them information from inside my house, about Serrano. You told them about the warehouse. Yes. Dominic turned. His face was pale from recovery, but his eyes were clear. You lied to me every day. I was trying to protect Henry. A quiet laugh left him. There was no humor in it. That sentence sounds familiar. Claire looked at the phone. I know. You decided I could not be trusted with the truth. Yes. You made choices for me because you believed fear gave you the right. Yes. The answers stopped him. Dominic had prepared himself for excuses. Claire offered none. She stepped closer to the desk. I was wrong. His jaw tightened. That does not return what you took. No. You hid my son for 8 months. Claire's eyes filled. I know. You invited federal agents into my life without telling me. I know. They could have arrested me beside Serrano. I tried to prevent that. You tried. His voice sharpened for the first time. You made an agreement with people you did not control, then sent me into a building where they decided when to move. Claire flinched. Dominic saw it. He lowered his voice, but not his anger. You were afraid, so you made the decision alone. Yes, just as I did to you. Claire looked at him. That is what I finally understood. Silence filled the study. Rain moved against the windows. Dominic placed one hand on the edge of the desk, protecting his injured side without appearing to do so. Claire continued. I told myself I was different because I was protecting Henry from your world. You were protecting him from Serrano. I was also protecting myself from trusting you. Dominic said nothing. I kept waiting for you to become the man I needed before I told you the truth. Claire's voice shook. But I never gave you the chance to choose. Pain moved through Dominic's face. You stole 8 months of my son's life from me, and you built a marriage where telling you the truth felt more dangerous than running. The words remained between them. Neither erased the other. Dominic looked away. Claire pressed both hands against the desk. I loved you when I left. His eyes closed. I loved you when I found out I was pregnant. Dominic's breathing changed. I loved you when I deleted your number because loving you did not make me trust you. He opened his eyes. Claire looked directly at him. And I love you now. That is why this hurts. Dominic's control cracked. You think it does not hurt me? I know it does. No. He stepped closer. You know what you felt. You do not know what it was like to stand beside our son and understand that every memory in his face belonged to you and none belonged to me." Claire's tears fell. "I cannot repair that. No, I can only stop hiding." Dominic looked at the phone. Claire unlocked it and placed it in front of him. "Every message is there." He did not touch it. "Read them." "I do not want to." "You should. I already know enough." Claire reached into her pocket and removed her own phone. She placed it beside the prepaid device. "No more hidden conversations." Dominic stared at both phones. Then he reached inside his jacket. He removed the encrypted phone he had carried throughout their marriage, the one Claire had never been allowed to touch. He placed it beside hers. "No more locked rooms," he said. Claire looked at him. "Can you do that? I do not know." The honesty was quiet. "I have spent my entire life surviving through secrets. So have I." Dominic's gaze moved toward the ceiling. Henry's cry traveled faintly from upstairs. Both of them turned toward the door. For 1 second, neither moved. Then Claire reached for the handle. Dominic stepped beside her. They walked into the hallway together. Upstairs, Henry cried for both of them. This time, neither parent faced him alone. Henry was standing in his crib when Claire and Dominic entered the nursery. His cheeks were wet. One hand gripped the wooden rail while the other reached toward them. Dominic moved first, then stopped. He looked at Claire. The pause was small, but she understood it. He was asking. Claire nodded. Dominic lifted Henry carefully, protecting the wound in his side. The baby pressed both palms against his father's face, then rested his head beneath Dominic's chin. Claire stood beside them. No apology had repaired what happened in the study. No promise had erased the months of deception between them. Still, the three of them were in the same room. For that night, it was enough. The following morning, Claire placed a legal pad on the dining table. Dominic entered with coffee in one hand and Henry balanced against his other shoulder. He looked at the pages. "You made another list." "Yes." "Should I be worried?" "You should read it." Dominic placed Henry in the high chair and sat across from her. Claire had written every condition she could no longer leave to trust alone. No surveillance between them. No hidden financial decisions involving Henry. No threats concealed under the word protection. Equal authority over medical care, education, travel and security, independent attorneys, separate access to money. The right for Claire to leave the estate with Henry under agreed safety procedures. Dominic read each line in silence. When he reached the final page, his jaw tightened. "You want access to the security network?" "Yes. That includes sensitive information. It includes information about the house where I live." He looked at her. "Some of it cannot leave the property. Then teach me what can and cannot leave." His gaze remained on hers. "You want to understand the system. I want to stop living inside systems I cannot see." Dominic looked back at the page. Claire continued. "If you believe there is an immediate threat, you can increase security. You cannot imprison me. You cannot remove my phone. You cannot decide that fear cancels my rights. I never removed your phone. You would have." The honesty of that statement silenced him. Dominic set the papers down. "What happens if we disagree? We talk. That is not always practical. Then we involve both attorneys. That is expensive." Claire almost smiled. "You can afford it." A faint shadow of humor touched his face. Then it disappeared. "And if you decide to leave me?" The question was quieter. Claire looked at Henry, who was crushing pieces of banana against the tray. "I leave. With him. With an agreement that protects his relationship with you." Dominic's fingers closed around the pen. Every old instinct told him to refuse. Claire could see the battle in his face. Control had kept him alive. Control had built his empire. Control had once convinced him that love could be made safe if every door belonged to him. He signed the papers, not because he liked them, because he understood that Claire could never love him freely while afraid of what refusal might cost. They began counseling 2 weeks later. Dominic hated the office. The room contained soft chairs, pale walls, and a bowl of wrapped candy on a low table. He sat with the posture of a man waiting for interrogation. Dr. Miriam Shaw looked at him over a pair of thin glasses. "What happens inside you when Claire says she wants to leave?" Dominic stared at the window. "I begin planning how to stop it." Claire looked down at her hands. Dr. Shaw asked, "Why? Because leaving creates exposure. For whom? Everyone. Claire or you?" Dominic did not answer. The silence lasted long enough to become honest. Finally, he said, "Me." Claire looked at him. Dominic continued. "When people leave, they take information, patterns, weaknesses. They become vulnerable." Dr. Shaw waited. He looked toward Claire. "And sometimes they take your child." Pain entered the room. Claire did not defend herself. She had learned that explanation could become another way of avoiding responsibility. Dr. Shaw turned toward her. "What happens inside you when Dominic tries to protect you?" Claire answered more quickly. "I disappear." Dominic's face tightened. Claire continued. "I stop thinking about what I want. I start calculating what he will allow. Then I make decisions in secret because secrecy feels like the only place I still belong to myself." Dominic looked away. The sessions did not fix them. They made hiding more difficult. That was the beginning of change. Outside the family, Dominic's world was collapsing into choices. Victor Serrano remained in federal custody. Several men in his organization agreed to cooperate. Port officials who had once ignored irregular shipments began answering subpoenas. Vale Maritime came under investigation. Dominic could protect the old system, but doing so would require the same threats, payments, and disappearances that had built it. One evening, Claire found him alone in the library surrounded by account ledgers. Henry slept upstairs. Rain moved across the lake. Dominic looked exhausted. "What are these?" she asked. "Companies that need to close? How many?" "Enough." Claire sat across from him. "What happens if you close them?" "I lose 3 terminals, 2 offshore accounts, and several people who have been loyal to me for years." "Loyal to you or loyal to the money?" Dominic looked at the pages. "I am not certain there is a difference." He spent the next 4 months taking apart the empire that had made his name feared. He sold nightclubs used to wash money. He closed storage facilities that existed only on paper. He transferred legitimate port contracts into audited companies. Men who had served his father accused him of weakness. One threatened to reveal enough information to send Dominic to prison. Dominic did not order the man silenced. He called his attorney. The decision cost him $20 million and control of one of the busiest routes along the Gulf. Claire watched him sign the agreement. His hand did not shake. Afterward, they stood alone in the conference room. "Do you regret it?" she asked. Dominic looked through the glass at the river. "I regret that it took Henry to make me understand what all of this was buying." What was it buying? More things to defend. The federal agreement did not make Dominic innocent. It made him accountable. He provided information about Serrano's network. He surrendered property linked to illegal operations. He accepted years of monitoring over Vale Maritime. In return, prosecutors focused on the rival organization and allowed Dominic to retain control of the legitimate companies he rebuilt. Caleb remained beside him through the transition. His shoulder healed slowly. A pale scar formed near the collarbone. One afternoon, Claire found Caleb in the garden watching Henry chase a ball across the grass. "You never trusted me," she said. Caleb looked at her. "I did not. And now, He watched Dominic kneel to return the ball to Henry. "Now I believe you are both equally dangerous to each other." Claire smiled. "That sounds almost affectionate." It was not. Still, Caleb's expression softened. The estate changed too. The camera outside Claire's bedroom disappeared. The interior locks were reprogrammed so she and Dominic held equal access. The nursery windows were replaced with reinforced glass that could open from inside. The security room no longer belonged only to Dominic. He showed Claire every screen, every route, every alarm. The first time she entered alone, no guard followed her. It should have been a small thing. It felt enormous. Security remained around the property, but it became visible and agreed upon. No one followed Claire without her knowledge. No one read her messages. No one decided where she could go before asking. Dominic struggled. Sometimes he reached for control before remembering the promise. One morning, Claire announced she was taking Henry into the city to meet Mara. Dominic looked toward the window. "The north road is not fully secure. Then we use the south road. I would prefer you wait." "I know." Dominic studied her. The old answer gathered in his face. "No." Instead, he took a breath. "Take Caleb." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Ask me." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Would you take Caleb?" "Yes." He looked almost offended by how simple the agreement had been. Claire touched his arm. "That is what asking feels like." He looked down at her hand. "I am learning." Months passed. Henry grew steadier on his feet. He learned to say Mama first. Dominic pretended not to care. Then Henry said Dada while reaching toward him across the breakfast table. Dominic went completely still. Claire watched tears enter his eyes before he could hide them. Henry repeated the word. Dominic lifted him from the chair and held him close. That evening, Claire found Dominic alone in the nursery. Henry slept with one hand resting near his face. Dominic stood beside the crib. "You are checking whether he is breathing," Claire said. "Yes. So am I." She moved beside him. Their shoulders touched. Dominic looked at her. "Are you still afraid of me?" Claire did not answer quickly. "Sometimes." Pain moved through his eyes. She continued, "But not in the same way. What does that mean? I used to be afraid that loving you would erase me. And now I am afraid, because loving anyone gives them the power to hurt you." Dominic looked down at Henry. "That never changes." "No." Claire placed her hand beside his on the crib rail. "But it is different when both people know they can leave." Nearly a year after the hospital call, Dominic asked Claire to travel with him to Asheville. He gave no explanation. They left Henry with Mara for the afternoon and drove through the city beneath a clear spring sky. Dominic stopped outside the brick building where Claire had lived. The bookstore still occupied the first floor. A small bell rang when customers entered. Claire looked at him. "Why are we here?" Dominic glanced toward the upper windows. "I wanted to see it without anger." The landlord allowed them into the empty apartment. Another tenant had recently moved out. The walls were bare. Sunlight crossed the worn floorboards. Claire stood where Henry's crib had once been. Dominic walked through the small room slowly. "I hated this place," he said. "Because it was not yours. Because you survived here without me." Claire looked at him. Dominic stood near the window. "I thought needing me was the same as loving me. And now I think this place protected you from the man I was." He reached into his coat and removed a folder. Claire laughed softly. "Another legal document. You trained me." She opened it. The Lake Pontchartrain estate had been transferred into a family trust. Claire and Dominic held equal control. A second document confirmed permanent joint custody of Henry, regardless of whether they remained together. Claire read the page twice. "You signed this already?" "Yes." "You would keep joint custody even if I refused whatever is inside your other pocket." Dominic looked at her. Yes. Only then did he remove the ring. It was not the enormous diamond he had given her before their first wedding. This one was simple, a single stone set in a narrow band. Dominic did not kneel immediately. The first time I asked you to marry me, I offered you my name, my house, and my protection. Claire's eyes burned. And this time, my truth. His voice lowered. My choice. Your choice. And the right to walk away if I forget that loving you does not mean owning you. He knelt. The most powerful man Claire had ever known looked up at her without certainty. Claire Bennett, will you marry the man I am trying to become? She let the silence remain. Dominic did not rush her. He did not stand. He waited. Claire looked around the apartment where she had once chosen fear over trust, where she had held Henry through lonely nights, where she had built a life from almost nothing. Then she looked at Dominic. Yes. His eyes closed for 1 second. Claire smiled through tears. But I am keeping my name. Dominic stood. I expected nothing less. They married beneath the live oaks at the estate. The ceremony was small. Mara stood beside Claire. Caleb stood beside Dominic, one hand resting near the scar in his shoulder. Dr. Hart came from Asheville and sat near the front. Henry carried the rings in a wooden box. Halfway down the path, he dropped them into the grass. The guests laughed. Dominic knelt in his dark suit and helped Henry search. The boy placed both hands on his father's cheeks. Dominic forgot the rings. Claire watched them beneath the trees. Once Dominic had cared about appearing untouchable. Now he sat in the grass while his son pulled at his collar. When they reached the vows, Dominic took Claire's hands. I believed love was dangerous because it gave people something they could take from me. His voice remained steady. I was wrong. Love became dangerous when I treated it like property. You and Henry are not mine to control. You are the family I choose to stand beside. Claire looked into his eyes. I believed a secret could protect the people I loved. She tightened her fingers around his. I was wrong. Secrets do not remove danger. They decide who faces it alone. I choose not to face it alone anymore. 2 years later, Henry ran through the garden while Dominic followed several steps behind. Claire sat on the terrace reviewing documents for the Vale Maritime Foundation. The company now funded legal aid port safety programs and medical care for families working along the Gulf. Her phone rang. For half a second, the sound returned her to the hospital. The white lights, the empty blanket, the name she had been forced to speak. Claire answered. It was Henry's preschool confirming his first day. She ended the call and looked toward the garden. Henry was running too close to the fountain. Dominic caught him and lifted him into the air. Henry laughed. Claire walked toward them. Dominic offered his free hand. He did not pull her closer. He waited. Claire took it. The gates remained at the edge of the property. The guards remained beyond the trees. Danger had not disappeared. Neither had the past. But the doors inside the house were open. Dominic carried Henry on one arm. Claire walked beside him with her hand in his. Not behind him, not beneath his protection. Beside him. Together, they walked home.